Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Politicians in Ottawa are reacting to the news that Canadian entrepreneur Michael Spavor received an 11-year sentence for spying in China. Protesters gathered at Chinook Hospital in Lethbridge, responding to the recent wage cuts announced by the UCP. And we hear about a Christian who was attacked and almost died for simply handing out Bibles in India.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Thanks so much for joining us. Ottawa is reacting to news that a Canadian entrepreneur has been sentenced to 11 years in a Chinese prison. Michael Spavor was charged with espionage or spying shortly after Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou was arrested at the request of the United States and detained here in Canada. She's facing bank and wire fraud charges south of the border.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this decision rendered after a legal process that lacked both fairness and transparency. Our thoughts are with Michael and his family during this difficult time. We've maintained from the beginning that Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig are being detained arbitrarily, and we will continue to call for their immediate release. And we will continue to work tirelessly to secure their freedom.
Officials say there's no word yet on the verdict for Michael Kovrig. As for another Canadian, Robert Lloyd Schellenberg, who was convicted of drug smuggling in China in 2018, an appeal to his death sentence was rejected. Minister of Foreign Affairs Marc Garneau said in a statement that Canada strongly condemns the court's decision and Schellenberg's arbitrary sentence. As for the two Michaels, Garneau says Canada will continue to fight for their release.
We feel that we need to continue to argue for the release of the two Michaels. That has not yet succeeded, but we will continue to do it because fundamentally we know that the practice of arbitrary detention with a mock sham trial with absolutely no transparency whatsoever and a verdict that is completely unjustified are not acceptable in terms of international rules-based law. And we have felt that not only will we continue to try to find a way to secure the release of the two Michaels, we will also build at the same time the consensus amongst other countries to put pressure on China to respect international rules-based law. And I think the fact that we're increasing the number of countries on the Declaration on Arbitrary Detention speaks to the fact that more and more countries are realizing that it's important to send that message to China.
Meanwhile, the extradition hearing for Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou kicked off today in BC Supreme Court. Government lawyers are making the case of why Meng could face charges while her defense team is fighting for her release. Her long-awaited extradition hearing is proceeding as courts in China continue to prosecute Canadians whose sentencing and detentions are widely seen as retaliation for her 2018 arrest. Both Meng and Huawei deny the allegations that she misled HSBC about Huawei's control over another company, putting it at risk of violating U.S. sanctions against Iran. Drug maker Moderna says it will build an mRNA vaccine manufacturing plant here in Canada within the next couple of years. The company signed a memorandum of understanding with Ottawa that will result in Canada becoming the home of Moderna's first foreign operation. The company is based in Massachusetts.
We have recently finalized an agreement with Moderna to build a state-of-the-art mRNA facility, a vaccine manufacturing facility with pandemic response capabilities right here in Canada. And the investment we're talking that Moderna is going to be making in Canada will position Canada as a center of excellence for mRNA technology and next-generation medicines. Because as I was saying in French before, we know that you're looking at a number of vaccines to cure diseases, even cancer. So we're looking forward to your research in Canada. So not only will have a manufacturing facility, a center of excellence, but this will also position Canada as a global mRNA research and development hub. Obviously, in exchange, the government of Canada has made commitments to buy a number of vaccines that will come out of that facility in order to ensure the resiliency of Canadians. And that applies in pandemic and non-pandemic time, because you would know that Canada buys vaccines on an annual basis.
Our federal health minister, Patty Hajdu, recently chastised the Alberta government and Premier Jason Kenney for dropping all COVID-19 restrictions. Political reporter Brian Lilly says that move by the minister was pure partisan politics.
When you consider that British Columbia's numbers have been rising faster than Alberta's without the same dropping of restrictions, then yeah, it is pure politics. That's all it is. They're campaigning against Jason Kenney in Alberta. They think that they've got a shot at a couple of seats in Calgary, perhaps some in Edmonton, and they're hopeful that by campaigning against Premier Kenney, who isn't popular in all parts of the province at the moment, that they might be able to win a couple of those seats.
Mr. Lilly will also discuss if he thinks we may in fact see a fall federal election. That Q&A is coming up after business news. Nurses and healthcare workers were outside of Chinook Regional Hospital in Lethbridge on Wednesday, protesting the recent wage cuts announced by the UCP. Carson Marsouk has local reactions during today's province-wide protests.
Rallies were held at hospitals throughout Alberta on Wednesday as thousands of nurses and healthcare staff gathered to protest a proposed 3% wage rollback. The United Nurses of Alberta has been in talks with the Alberta UCP government since July, trying to negotiate a new collective agreement. UNA Local 120 President and registered nurse Margie Eames says that almost everyone in the healthcare system is demoralized by the wage cuts.
Frankly, it's very disheartening and insulting that at this point that's the value that nurses hold for this government.
There are roughly 30,000 nurses locked in the bargaining dispute. Eames says they are currently seeing a shortage of staff at the Chinook Regional Hospital, and with the new wage cuts, she says it's only going to discourage people from entering the industry.
Not just in rural sites, but also in our urban sites and in our hospital here. And so the thought that these rollbacks are going to entice people to go into nursing or to stay, we just don't see an end in sight if this continues to be the path that they're on.
Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips says the announcement of any wage cuts in Alberta is simply a disconnect between the UCP and Albertans.
All of those plans by Mr. Kenney reveal fundamentally a disconnect between his priorities, which are giving away billions of dollars to already profitable corporations or wasting it on schemes and bets, and what we actually need to keep our communities moving here in Lethbridge and elsewhere across the province.
In a statement from Minister of Finance Travis Taves, reads in part, "We are facing a $93 billion debt, and we spend more than half of the province's operating budget on public sector compensation." It goes on to say, our government is also committed to standing up for the healthcare system and representing the best interests of all Albertans. The UNA said the two sides met on Tuesday and will return to the bargaining table on Friday. For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marsouk.
Another 122 Albertans have died from an unintentional drug overdose in May. The recently released data from the province also shows the death toll for the first 5 months of 2021 was 624. That is a 41% increase from the same period last year. Almost 98% of the deaths were opioid related. The rate of drug poisoning in the province in May was 32.4 per 100,000 people, with the majority of fatalities occurring in both Calgary and Edmonton. A collision on the Trans-Canada Highway west of Calgary earlier today involving a semi and a 5-ton truck has left 2 people dead. The crash occurred just after 11:30 a.m. west of Morley Road. Police say a Q van heading eastbound veered into the westbound lanes, causing the collision with a white car and the highway tractor. A portion of the highway was closed as they dealt with the tragedy. EMS officials said another 3 people were transported to hospital by ambulance. Now, at the time of our broadcast, RCMP did not provide a time for the reopening of the highway. Now, here's a follow-up to a story we first brought you on Tuesday. City Council has approved management of the Lethbridge Airport to stay as a City of Lethbridge department until 2 key triggers are met before revisiting the management contract. Those include having 2 consecutive years of $500,000 net operating profit and more than 150,000 annual passengers. General Manager of Opportunity Lethbridge, Michael Kelly, says in order to make a profit, the land surrounding the airport needs to be diversified.
Get diversity in our income out there and not just rely on passenger traffic. Passenger traffic is very important. Tourism is very important for Lethbridge and Southern Alberta. But as we see with the economic situation that we're in, we need to diversify. And the land development component will add not only lease money coming in from land leases, but taxation money. And the taxation money is very key because it can be utilized anywhere for our citizens for any other projects that we have.
Officials say when fully developed, the airport lands could provide $10 million annually in lease revenue and an additional $10 million in tax revenue. Locals in our city will be taking a bite out of some juicy ribs this weekend. The Lethbridge Rotary Rib Fest is set to take place. As Micah Quinn explains now, this year's event will feature a drive-through style where you'll receive those tasty ribs right from the comfort of your own vehicle.
The 2020 Rib Fest was a test run for the event, but members of the Rotary Club say the drive-through format was so popular they decided to do it again this year.
This crew that does the Rib Fest does a circuit, and they go from Fort McMurray to Grand Prairie to Calgary to Edmonton to Red Deer and all these other places, and we actually had the highest numbers in 3 days than any of those other centers.
Organizers say last year's event brought delicious ribs to close to 5,000 vehicles, and for this year, they're expecting an even higher turnout.
They come in, and then we actually turn here right at the fire lane, and behind me is where the ribbers will set up. So once you go in and you pick which ribber you'd like to go through, you'll come out here, and so you'll have the opportunity to either take your ribs, go home, or turn right, and you can come into our park and eat section. So over here we have our major sponsors they're setting up. We have local vendors from Lethbridge, so you'll be able to get your kettle corn, frozen yogurt. There's all sorts of other treats and stuff.
The money raised at Rib Fest will go towards fundraising for projects for the Rotary Club in the local community.
You have the opportunity to buy a 50-50 ticket. Somebody on Sunday, we're going to write a check out for $10,000. Maybe that's you. When you come and get your ribs, buy a ticket from us for $20. The revenues that generate from that make a difference in our community, make our community a better place. That's what Rotary does with it.
The NMAX Center will play host to the event from August 13th to the 15th. For Bridge City News, I'm Mike Quinn.
The Professional Bull Riders Canada organization just announced a massive amount of cash for participants in the year-end PBR Canada National Finals. Over $175,000 will be awarded to bull riders competing in the event. Riders will also be making the trek to Lethbridge on August 27th and the 28th for the PBR Canada Cup Series. The general manager for PBR Canada, Jason Davidson, says there will be huge money up for grabs for riders at the Lethbridge event all the way through to the finals.
No other venue we want to kick the 2021 Cup Series tour off is in Lethbridge. And we will be doing that here in a couple weeks. And in that stretch between Lethbridge into Edmonton, November 12th and 13th, there's $250,000 on the line for these bull riders. So it's there's a lot of money to be won. And I think it gives the guys a lot of time to focus on that task at hand. Prepare themselves mentally, physically, and you know what? Our TSN viewers and our live event audience is going to be in for a real treat.
The PBR Canada National Finals will take place November 12th and the 13th. Some of Team Canada's Olympic champions say their gold medals prove that investing in women's soccer is worthwhile and hope their win in Tokyo will inspire many other young girls to play.
This medal right here means the world. It means everything. It's such an honor to bring this back home to Canada and to, arrive at the airport and just see the excitement from our families, our friends. It was just such an amazing experience to be in Japan for the last couple of months, and we created memories that we'll never forget. To have a team in Toronto or anywhere in Canada would be amazing for us. I'd love to come home to Toronto and play. So I think we'll see some positive change on that front very soon.
Around 100 firefighters from South Africa were set to land in Winnipeg today. The contingent will join the 400 other firefighters currently battling wildfires across the province. The Manitoba government says the firefighters were tested for COVID-19 prior to their departure and were tested once again upon arriving in Canada. There are currently 143 active wildfires burning throughout Manitoba. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister spoke to the media about why he will not be seeking re-election. Pallister, who's been leader of the Manitoba Conservatives for 10 years and Premier for 5, says it was time for a change, but he says he was proud of his team's accomplishments.
The honor of my life has been serving as our Premier. Manitobans have gifted me with the great privilege of leading our province with the 2 largest back-to-back majority government wins in over a century. Our team entered office facing enormous challenges from the very beginning, and we charted bold, new directions to fix the finances, repair the services, and rebuild the economy of our province. We produced the first balanced budget in over a decade, while creating the largest ongoing per-person investment of any Canadian province in healthcare, education, and family services. And we did this while lowering the tax burden on Manitoba families. And today, Manitoba is incredibly well positioned to springboard into a stronger economic and social future with even greater social progress. And that's why I believe that this is the right time. There's no easy time. It wasn't easy for my family and I to make the decision to enter public life, and it's not easy to make the decision as to when to leave it either.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced his resignation over a barrage of sexual harassment allegations. This is just a year after he was widely hailed during the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic in the state.
This comes as he's facing a scathing report by the Attorney General, who last week released an investigation finding that he had sexually harassed at least 11 women. The governor made his announcement that he is stepping down at his office in New York City today. There was no journalists at the briefing, and right now we believe that he is at the Executive Mansion right behind me in Albany. The governor said that he is going to be resigning in 14 days, and at that point, the Lieutenant Governor, Kathy Hochul, was going to be stepping in and becoming governor, and she will be the first female governor in New York's history.
U.S. President Joe Biden says he finds it disingenuous that some governors who complain of federal overreach in COVID-19 measures are now pushing to ban mask mandates imposed by municipalities and schools in their states.
When I suggest that people in zones where there is a high risk wear the mask like you all are doing, I'm told that government should get out of the way and not do that. They don't have authority to do that. And I find it interesting that some of the very people who are saying that, who hold government positions, are people who are threatening that if a principal says that everyone in my school should wear a mask or the school board votes for it, that governor will nullify that.
The Taliban has seized 3 more provincial capitals in Afghanistan and a local army headquarters, completing their blitz across the country's northeast and pressing their offensive elsewhere. Officials say insurgents now control 2/3 of the nation as the U.S. and NATO finalize their withdrawal after a decades-long war there. While Kabul itself has not been directly threatened in the advance, the offensive continues to stretch Afghan forces, now largely fighting against the insurgents on their own. The United States has issued a fresh warning to the Taliban that any government that comes to power through force in Afghanistan will not be recognized internationally.
It is not just our contention that any government that comes to power in Afghanistan at the barrel of a gun will lack international support and international legitimacy. It is, in fact, the consensus. Ambassador Khalilzad is currently in Doha. He is there to advance a collective international response to what can only be termed as a rapidly deteriorating security situation. In order for us and for our allies and partners to be able to recognize any future government of Afghanistan and to provide assistance to it, it must emerge from a political settlement that meets 5 criteria. First, it must be inclusive. Second, it must respect the rights of all Afghans, including women and minorities. Third, it allows the Afghan people to have a say in choosing their leaders. Fourth, it must prevent Afghan soil from being used to threaten the United States and its allies and partners. And fifth, and finally, it must respect its commitments in terms of international law and international humanitarian law.
Dr. K.A. Swamy had a passion for handing out Bibles. However, he was left critically injured after being attacked in India after handing out copies of God's holy book. Greg Musselman from Voice of the Martyrs caught up with Dr. Swamy's wife to discuss how this impacted their family.
After being attacked by a group of Hindu extremists, Swamy suffered a brain hemorrhage. He had been distributing Bibles in the city of Hyderabad in the southern Indian state of Telangana on January 21, 2017. Pastor John Sankara Rao is a friend of Swamy.
Swamy was attacked because it was the spirit of Hindu fanatics
those who want to stop Christianity in India. They don't want to see any Hindus to become Christians. And they say that Hinduism is becoming less and less because Christianity is growing more and more because of this people with faith. They are distributing the Gospels and Bibles and preaching about Jesus Christ to turn towards Him. And that is the jealousy and then hatred of the Hindu fanatics.
A year after the attack on Swami, Sujatha had her own medical emergency. She had surgery for heart artery blockages. And in June of 2021, she and Swami both ended up in the hospital after testing positive for COVID. Sujatha, in all that you've been through with your husband's situation and all the other things that you've had to deal with and the stress, how has this affected your faith in Jesus?
I have a full confidence on God that He will guide me and He will help me. And I was able to manage the situation with the help of God only, I can say. And some of the family members, they helped us.
Sujatha says she is grateful for all the prayers and support from Christians around the world.
I'm very happy that so many people are praying for us, our family. And I'm very thankful for everyone, those who are upholding our family in your prayers. Thank you very much and keep praying for us.
We had another beautiful day in Lethbridge, and the hot temperatures we've been experiencing will be sticking around for the next few days. A full look at the weather picture is on deck. It was another beautiful hot day here in southwestern Alberta. Tonight we can expect a few clouds developing with a low near 10 degrees. Thursday clearing with a high near 24. Friday mainly sunny with the mercury increasing further to 32. Even hotter on Saturday with a high expected near 35. Sunday just a couple of degrees cooler at 33. Monday the clouds return with a high expected of 29. And on Tuesday, good chance of showers developing and a temperature of 21. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 26 degrees and an average low of 11. The highest temperature on this day was recorded in 1996 at 37 degrees, and the record low was a chilly 0 in 2007. Sunrise was at 6:16, sunset at 8:57. The days are definitely getting shorter. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Victoria, BC had a heat warning today. Tomorrow, much of the same with a high near 31. It'll be partly cloudy in Vancouver with a high near 28. Lots of sunshine and 23 is on tap for Calgary on Thursday. Just a few clouds and 24 for Edmonton. Sunny and 21 for Regina. Partly cloudy and 23 degrees for Saskatoon. A mixture of sun and cloud and 21 for Winnipeg. Rain and 30 is on tap for both Toronto and Ottawa on Thursday. A chance of showers developing and a high of 27 for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, expect rain and 30 in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Showers and 28 degrees in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Light rain and 27 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect periods of drizzle and a high near 17 degrees. Grocery retailer Metro missed expectations as it reported a 4% drop in its third quarter earnings. Company officials say its profit fell to $252.4 million. That is down from $263.5 million from the same quarter last year when shoppers stocked up at the start of the pandemic. Sales also declined from $5.84 to $5.72 billion. Now, on an adjusted basis, Metro earned $1.06 per diluted share, which was below the $1.13 analysts were expecting. Canada Goose Holdings says strong sales in Canada and China pushed its first quarter revenue up from $26.1 to $56.3 million. The luxury winter parka maker says revenue in Canada grew 126.1% this past year, while its direct-to-consumer revenue in China soared 188.7%. The Toronto-based company also recorded an 80.8% increase in its global e-commerce revenue. It still posted a net loss, however, of $56.7 million compared with a loss of $50.1 million in the same quarter last year. National Bank of Canada will be getting a new chief executive in the fall. It says current CEO Louis Vachon will retire at the end of October after close to 15 years on the job. Chief Operating Officer Laurent Ferreira will replace Van Schon in the top post as of November 1st. Ferreira joined National Bank in 1998 and was previously Executive Vice President and co-head Financial Markets. Now, here's a look at our markets. The TSX was up 58 points on the day to finish at 20,554. The Dow was up 220 points to 35,485. The S&P 500 was up 10 points to 4448, and the Nasdaq was down 22 points on the day to 14,765. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 96 cents to 69.25 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 3 cents to 406 US. Gold was down 12 cents to 1751.58 US an ounce, and silver was even to finish at 23.55 US an ounce. Wheat is at $425 per metric ton, barley's at $420, canola's at $8.88, and corn is at $450 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 70 cents to $122.95. Feeder cattle were down 55 cents to $158.77, and lean hogs were down 5 cents to $109.63. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.95 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a collision on the Trans-Canada Highway west of Calgary earlier today involving a semi and a 5-ton truck has left 2 people dead. The crash occurred just after 11:30 a.m. west of Morley Road. Police say a portion of the highway was closed as they dealt with the tragedy. EMS officials also said 3 other people were transported to hospital by ambulance. Coming up, political reporter Brian Lilly explains why he believes we may still see a fall federal election. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is urgently looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers will drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, call 403-332-4320 or email volunteer@volunteerlethbridge.com. For their 10th anniversary season, the Lethbridge Shakespeare Performance Society is presenting A Midsummer Night's Dream at various locations around the city. On Friday, August 13th, enjoy the beautiful Nikayuko Japanese Garden as the stage for this classic romantic comedy. Gates open at 7 p.m. with the show beginning at 7:30. Tickets are $20 per person and must be purchased in advance. For more details and tickets, visit nikayuko.com. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
You know, it appears as though we're in constant election watch. Many Canadians thought we'd get the call last Sunday, but it didn't come. Joining us now to talk about a potential federal election is political reporter Brian Lilly, joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, are we potentially still on track for a September vote?
Yeah, there was some money being placed, Hal, on last Sunday being the day that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau would walk across the lawn at Rideau Hall and call on the Governor General. But you're right, it didn't happen. My understanding is the Prime Minister is off for a bit of family vacation time in the Muskoka region of Ontario, Toronto's cottage country, a few days away with the family, and that he's scheduled to be back in Ottawa on Friday or Saturday. We're looking at a call on Sunday or in the days after. That is, unless they look around and they say, you know what, given the fact that we've got rising case counts in British Columbia and Quebec, 2 areas that we really need to win, given that northwestern Ontario, where we've got Liberal MPs, is on fire with wildfires, that there are about 300 in British Columbia, maybe they pull back. And so I've been looking at all these factors and talking to Liberal strategists, and most still seem to believe that they're ready to go. And then I don't know if you spotted this, but on Sunday, there were 3 Liberal MPs that announced they're not running again. Adam Vaughan in Toronto, Karen McCrimmon, who's a former RCAF officer, Will Amos, made famous for not wearing clothes in Parliament. They all announced that they were stepping down, and 2 of those were filled with appointed candidates the very next day. So the Liberals appear to be election ready. As long as they don't get cold feet over COVID numbers or wildfires, we're heading to the polls in September.
Now, Brian, I have a quick story to share with you about Adam Vaughan. When you and I worked together in Ottawa for the Sun News Network, and first time I went up to the hill and center block there, I met Adam Vaughan. I introduced myself to the guy, and before he said his name, he says, "You don't know who I am? Listen, pal, Google me. Google me." And he walked away from me. I'm like, what just happened here, right?
That describes Adam Vaughan to a T.
Yeah. Now, while Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is considering a fall vote complete with door knocking and rallies, his health minister wrote to the Kenney government here in Alberta, chastising us for dropping COVID-19 restrictions. Brian, is this anything more than pure partisan politics?
Well, when you consider that British Columbia's numbers have been rising faster than Alberta's without the same dropping of restrictions, then yeah, it is pure politics. That's all it is. They're campaigning against Jason Kenney in Alberta. They think that they've got a shot at a couple of seats in Calgary, perhaps some in Edmonton, and they're hopeful that by campaigning against Premier Kenney, who isn't popular in all parts of the province at the moment, that they might be able to win a couple of those seats. I know people in Western Canada think the election is over before it hits the Ontario-Manitoba border, but for Justin Trudeau to get his majority, which is the only reason we appear to be headed towards the polls, he needs seats in Western Canada. I'm not sure he's got the bandwidth to be able to pick up enough seats in Manitoba and British Columbia, so he's got to try for some urban seats. You know, they used to hold 1 or 2 in Saskatchewan. Maybe they get Ralph Goodale's seat back. Maybe they get back the 2 that they used to hold in Calgary or 1 in Edmonton. They need those seats. So yeah, this is about politics, and it's about making sure that progressive voters know, vote Trudeau when the election's called.
Now, the Liberals signed a childcare deal with Quebec recently where $6 billion will be handed over with no strings attached, Brian, but rejected a similar request from Alberta not once, but twice. That ain't right.
No, it definitely isn't. And, you know, the claim is, well, Quebec has a plan in place. They've got a program in place. Alberta doesn't. Alberta's minister in charge said, look, we've got a plan. We are willing to work with the federal government to make childcare costs lower for parents. You know, Manitoba just signed a deal and said the very same thing. I've been talking to the Ford government, but it looks like they're trying to campaign. Again, back to what we were just discussing. They're campaigning against Jason Kenney on this to troll for urban votes in Calgary and Edmonton. I'm starting to think they might be doing that because the Ford government is open to a deal, but they won't sign one with them. So, you know, all of this is going on against the backdrop of an election. Alberta should be getting between $3 and $4 billion over several years, just like Quebec. They wouldn't do it. It comes down to partisan politics and playing favorites, of course, again, with Quebec.
Now, you've lived and worked in Quebec, beautiful province, by the way, and you've covered the childcare system there quite extensively. You say it's held up as a model to follow. Do you still feel that way, or there may be some flaws in their system?
Oh, I've long seen flaws in the system when it comes to Quebec's childcare system. There are long waiting lists. It's a universal program. It started out at I think $5 a day, and then went to $7, now $10. It favors wealthy neighborhoods like Westmount, you know, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the country, and you're more likely to be able to get childcare there than in poorer neighborhoods. And when you think of governments helping parents with the cost of childcare, most people would say, well, help those who can least afford it instead of those who can most afford it. That's not always the way it goes. In addition to waiting lists, you know, give you an example that I've seen countless times. You've got one child in the system, you have a second or a third child, you've got to leave your kid in the daycare system. You can't keep them at home while the mother or father are on parental leave because you'll lose your spot, and then you're going to be on a waiting list. There are lots of problems like this that never get looked at. There are problems in terms of how flexible it is for the workforce. And, you know, a big thing that we're always told is that it gets more women into the workforce. I'll tell you how. Before the oil patch crashed, before Alberta's economy started experiencing trouble, there was a higher workplace participation rate among women in Alberta than women in Quebec, despite this massive multi-billion-dollar program.
Now, Brian, daycare and transit appear to be big-ticket items on the election spending spree radar. The feds also announced $321 million in new funding for programs to help Indigenous communities search burial sites at former residential schools and to support survivors in their communities. Now, wasn't this money that was promised years ago but never delivered?
Yeah, this was something that came out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and the Prime Minister, of course, promised to follow up on everything. The reason that we started to get former residential school sites searched by local bands in Kamloops and then Cowessess, and then the list goes on, it's happened in several, is that they got fed up waiting for the federal government to fulfill another empty, broken promise, like many of the boil water advisories. So this is coming out now. They're trying to check off as many boxes as they can before they ask key constituencies for their vote. And First Nations communities in many areas of the country have been reliable Liberal voters. That has been tested by the last few years and inaction on many files. So they're trying to paper over as much as they can. Again, everything this government is doing is looking towards a September vote if they can get all their ducks in a row and call it within the next few days.
Brian, let's talk a bit about the debt now, the federal debt. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation, I was chatting with Franco Terrazzano, the federal director, slammed the Trudeau Liberals recently because their debt is now over $1 trillion. Brian, doesn't the PM realize that eventually all of this money will have to be paid back? Will we potentially see new taxes on the horizon?
Well, of course, this is the Prime Minister who famously said the budget will balance itself. Now, of course, by that he meant grow the economy and tax revenue will rise and the budget will balance. That was before COVID-19, the massive spending that we saw. Some of that was justified, but Stephen Harper was right when he said that it was overkill in Canada. The number of things that we spent money on with no checks and balances, and much of it will continue even after the pandemic's over. The Parliamentary Budget Officer says without changes in either spending or taxation, we are looking at deficits into 2070. That year, I'll be 99. The Prime Minister will be 99 years old. We shouldn't be paying for things that happened now, 50 years from now. But that's what we're looking at if we don't change. So could we see tax increases? Well, the Liberals, of course, are always looking at wealth taxes. They always believe that the wealthy aren't paying their fair share, even though all the facts and figures show that they are. But they also keep coming back to this idea, Hal, of taxing the sale of your primary residence. That's always been sacrosanct. You don't do that in Canada. It was floated by former Liberal MP Adam Vaughan before the last election. The Liberals denied they were going to do it, but they keep funding research into this style of taxation. So the Canadian Taxpayers Federation was recently calling them out on this, and I agree. They've got to come clean on what they're going to do on taxing your home. A lot of people rely on that as a form of retirement income or to be able to buy the next home. The government needs to be straight on what their plans are and why they keep looking into this.
Now, during the pandemic, we've seen the rise of TV and Twitter doctors appearing to give non-partisan medical advice, and then it turns out they have some party ties, Brian. Now, you were recently writing about one such case in Alberta and another one in Ontario. Should the public know about the policies and politics of these doctors?
So, for example, the doctor here in Toronto, Dr. Nathan Stahl, he was going on TV, pontificating on all kinds of issues well outside of his specialty of geriatric medicine, sick days, school reopenings, and all of the things that he was pontificating on TV aligned with the Ontario Liberal Party. If you're going to do that, the public has a right to know so that they can filter what you're putting forward through that partisan political lens.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Well, we all know that people have different personalities, but do we know to what extent this can impact marital relationships? And perhaps more controversially, there are gender differences which can also impact marriage. Joining us to discuss this is Brent Taylor. He is a Lethbridge marriage coach and the author of His, Hers, Greatest Need. Of course, his and hers with a Z or a Z, which is an interesting way to spell that. Brent, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. It's again, it's an honor and it's a privilege to be here, and thank you.
Of course. So first of all, can you briefly share a little bit about what you do to help couples improve their relationships?
Right. Well, the book started out with discovering, and what I share is his and hers greatest need, which you can find in here. And then the single biggest reason why marriages break down, how to build them up. And again, the greatest way a husband loves his wife and the greatest way a wife loves her husband. Those are 4 key components that I share with them when I first meet with them or I do an introduction session. And that is the big aha. After that, I get into the program that I coach them with, UCG, Understanding, Communication, and Giving. And in that, in the understanding component, there's personalities, love languages, gender, plus values and beliefs. And then in the communication, we do a safe talk, which involves appreciation, sensitive items, and apology talk. I've incorporated the 5 apology languages from Dr. Gary Chapman into the scripting of the safe talk. But the most important part that I work with them on is the giving, UC&G, Understanding, Communication, and Giving. Really, I got to get to the heart. Everybody thinks it's a mindset. And yes, that's true, but it's really a heart set and it boils down to our motive. So that's the biggest area that I get to because most people don't realize how selfish we are.
Oh gosh, yeah, true. You need someone to almost hold up that mirror in front of you, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, of course, your book talks so much about the differences between men and women. So I guess before we get to talking about personality and gender differences, you write in your book that the greatest need for a husband is significance. Can you explain what you mean by husbands needing a significance?
Right. Well, kind of the best way I put it is every guy wants to be his wife's hero. Whether he's dating to be married or whether he is married and whether he's 22 or whether he's 62. Sometimes it can subside and things like that, but every guy wants to be his wife's hero. And every woman, she wants to be fought for. So it kind of makes sense that he wants to be her hero and she wants to be fought for. And it's kind of romantic, but I always say when, God created man, he said it was good. And we created woman, he said, whoo, man. And it really is. It's a love story. And yeah, it's not all full of roses and the roses grow better through the manure together. But the reality is deep down inside, he wants to be her hero. He wants to be important to her. And men can have ego issues. Tell me one man that doesn't struggle with ego issues. That's rooted in his desire to be significant. But sometimes it can tip the teeter-totter and confidence is one thing, but also humility and humbleness is another thing.
Mm-hmm. Where does that come from, do you think, that need of significance? I think we all have it, but you speak specifically to men.
Right. Now, women want to be significant as well. It's just not their deep core need. Hers is security, emotional and physical security. And, the man's is significance. It actually goes back to the book of Genesis. It goes back to the fall in the garden. And we kind of amped up our needs. We increased them because we wanted to be independent. We fell away. So there was actually a curse that said, cursed are you, you will toil the land all the days of your life. You can't work hard enough. Basically, he was saying, you want to be independent? I'm going to amp it up a little bit. Same thing with women. You want to be independent? I'm going to amp up your need for security. So it really comes down to that. But if you think about it, if a man's designed to be a provider and a protector, her need for security then falls into line with that protection. He wants to protect her. He was made to give his life for his wife. I use the Titanic. Even in the feminist world, I say, well, let's pretend we got the Titanic and the ship's going down and down and down and down, and you have co-captains instead of one captain. So you got man and woman, and everybody's jumping on lifeboats, and And there's only one lifeboat left and room for one more person. Man's looking at woman, and who do you think is going to say, you take the last spot on the last lifeboat? It better be the man.
Mm-hmm.
And who do you think is going to accept the offer?
The woman.
And who do you think is going to have some tears going down her face for how
Yeah.
much he loved her because he gave his life for his wife? And so, yeah, so that's really the litmus test that he wants to be her protector, her provider. He wants to fight for her, and she wants to be fought for. So it makes, sense that he would want to be her hero, which ties into being significant. Yes, she wants to be significant too, but it's not as deep a core need.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, of course, there are those who would argue that men and women are the same, that there's no real difference. But you, of course, would say that there really are differences in the way our brains are hardwired. Can you explain some of these gender differences?
Well, generally speaking, and it happens biologically at birth or at a very, very young age, boys and girls are wired basically the same. But at a very young age, we're talking weeks old, or even, I don't know if it's might be in the womb, but I think it's after, testosterone hits the brain of a little boy. Massive amounts of testosterone hit a little boy. But in the early stages, they're generally the same. The communication, the verbal interaction, when you're changing their diapers and you're smiling and goo goo gaga over your children, and there's a connection. But because of the testosterone that hits the male brain, it decreases his connection of that verbal, relational, emotional connection, and it increases his tendency for action and aggression. If he's going to be a provider, if he's going to sacrifice his life, then he has to be willing to put himself at the front end of the battle lines to protect his wife and children. That testosterone is necessary. And here's proof. Lots of ladies think, well, my husband just wants me for sex, or they feel used. Well, actually, man was designed to love his wife. A lot of people think God gave man, woman to be his helpmate. Yes, there's merit there, but largely God is a giver of love, and man was made to give his wife love. And he just happens, because of the testosterone, he happens to love physically. Women tend to connect emotionally first before the physical kicks in. They want to trust. They want to feel secure. They want to know things are looked after. They want to know that she can give herself to him. But men come alive physically first, then the emotional, and then women are kind of the opposite. So I always say God's got a sense of humor because they're kind of missing each other here. So there's a hardwired difference between male and female. Another one is, I believe it's the right side of the brain. The little boy's brain is more wired for spatial, how objects move in space. How many women, you're trying to find a house, you're going to go visit some friends, and you think, well, my husband should just ask for directions. And he goes, no. They think, well, he's got ego issues. Maybe a little bit, but also men actually enjoy figuring out how to get from here to here, how things move in space. They want to figure that out. So there's another difference. Ladies, they just want to get from point A to point B. And so there's a spatial arrangement. Ladies tend to be more relational, and guys tend to be more spatial.
Mm-hmm. And want to fix the problems too. So we all know that men like to fix problems, and women just want their husbands to listen to their problems.
Right, because I say, guys, listen with your eyes and zip your lip. And because most men think, why are we talking unless we're solving a problem? And women think, why are we solving a problem? I just want you to listen. Because men love solvingly. So when a husband is solving his wife's problem, he's actually loving her. But she doesn't see it as that. She takes it critically, because here's what most women don't realize. And I just said it to a couple the other day, and immediately she acknowledged and smiled. And I said, she wants to know that he cares about how she feels about the problem. So you don't need to fix the problem. You need to care how she feels about the problem, because she's looking for the heart connection. She's looking, again, for that security. She wants to know that you care about how she feels. So there's a definite difference. Whereas guys say, why don't we just solve the problem? Then you won't have those feelings anymore.
Yeah. It's funny how so many times couples have such different personalities. So like opposites, they say opposites seem to attract, right? But apparently the personality differences can cause some serious clashes. So is it important or worthwhile to take time to do a personality analysis in order to understand how we see the world as compared to our spouse?
The short answer is yes. It's definitely worthwhile. When I had my company called BCT Structures, I had to lose my $50 million company. Largest plant built in manufacturing. I know I'm bragging. See, there's the guy's ego. And I had to lose it all. But even when I had it and I was going through all my struggles in life, and I'm a bit of a softie, I wanted this for our employees, not too much of this and none of this. How do we get here? So all of the staff that I hired, I used the personality, and I used True Colors. I didn't know True Colors back then, but I was using this 8 questions. It's now 10 questions that I've expanded it to. It's all over North America. They use it in the school systems. And it's the simplest to use because in the color code of blue, green, orange, and gold, you can tell who's the more sensitive or romantic one, which is important when you're coaching couples. They also have cards for children. They can quickly arrange it in 10 seconds. They know who they are. Personalities is important because blue is sensitive, relational, green is analytical, orange is spontaneity, fun, go for it, and gold is organized and structured. They have their upside and their downside. It's very, very important. Goals are organized and structured and loyal, but they're bossy, controlling, and inflexible. Blues are sensitive, compassionate, and caring. They're bleeding heart and needy and an enabler. So we need to know our greatest strengths to be our greatest weaknesses. So what I do for couples, and I combine their personalities with their love languages. So they get their score on their love languages. So words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. So when you combine those two with the gender, you have a very powerful profile. And I share with the husband and wife how they individually tick, but also where they connect and where they disconnect. When you can understand each other, you can go, oh, that's why they behave and think the way they do. They have a different set of lenses. We also get into upbringing. So our upbringing is a huge manifestation. So it is very wise to understand. Most people think they're going to get it through osmosis. No, you need to learn.
Right. So when spouses do have those conflicting personality types, what advice do you have to adjust for this to make things work? Is there anything people need to adjust in their, I don't know, I don't want to say personality, but I guess, yeah.
Good question. The adjustment first comes from understanding. I think there's a huge wall that starts to come down when we understand the way each other thinks and feels and perspectives. So at least you can start to understand it. You don't just criticize or get mad at them for not seeing it my way. That's important. The other thing we do get to, which is huge, is because, as I shared with you before, when we cross our arms, that becomes the comfortable way. But if I was to reverse it, most people struggle to reverse it. That can be comfortable. So it's what we get used to. There's only 2 motives in the world. It's either love or selfishness. It's either what you can do for me or what can I do for you. Most of the time, Christian or non-Christian, we're focused on me, 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 me. We don't know it. That's our number one problem in the world. We're addicted to self. And we're comfortable with it. So we're habitually practiced at it. So I can get to the head and the heart, but if we don't get to the habit, so not only understanding, which helps, then helping them have a communication tool, which I call Safe Talk, but ultimately we need to start practicing giving. And here's the cool part. When we're giving, we're living. Why does it take a high river flood, a Fort McMurray fire, a California fire, a Haiti, a Japan, and New Orleans? Why does it take a disaster for us to get off our selfish couches and go give, expecting nothing in return? Expecting nothing in return. So if I can help husband and wife understand each other and they can start giving, expecting nothing in return. And I say, husbands, when you treat your wife right, she blossoms. Can you imagine if husbands and wives started putting the other one first? because the true definition of love is self-giving, not self-seeking. Love is me last and you first.
Yeah, what a wonderful world it would be. if
Well, that's why Jesus came to give his life. He wanted to show us that, not only save us, but show us that love is me last, not me. And when you start to put the other first, when you're giving, you come alive, and the gift is in the giving. So once we realize I was going in the wrong direction.
Right.
And the more I chase the me race, the more empty.
Brent, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom. We appreciate having you on again.
Thank you. And I just want to have that little quote I shared before. I said, if we can put love back in the marriage, we can put love back in the world.
There you go, right there. Brent Taylor is a Lethbridge marriage coach and the author of His, Hers, Greatest Need. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.